You know, superstar wide receivers are kind of like fireworks. They're flashy, explosive, draw your attention for a couple of minutes, and then before you know it, they're gone. Wide receivers have long been known for their superstar-like personas in the NFL, but because they are generally so reliant on their athleticism, it's not too uncommon to see a guy who was once a star in the league torching defenses left and right to all of a sudden become utterly forgettable. So today, let's take a look back at 10 NFL wideouts who were former superstars that quickly became afterthoughts overnight. First up, we got former Packers Pro Bowl wideout Jordy Nelson. Green Bay took Nelson in the second round of the 2008 draft, and while it took him a few years to get up to speed at the NFL level and crack the starting lineup on a regular basis, he eventually became a focal point for their passing attack. Nelson first started to make a name for himself in the 2010 playoffs during Green Bay's Super Bowl run when he accumulated almost half as many receiving yards and matched his 2 regular season touchdowns in just a quarter of the games. Having earned Aaron Rodgers' trust on the biggest stage, the following year he put up huge numbers, notching 1,263 yards and 15 touchdowns, absolutely smashing his previous career highs of 582 and 2, respectively. And from that point on, almost any time Rodgers needed a big completion, it was a borderline foregone conclusion where it was going. Number 87 in the green and gold. Between 2011 and 2016, he was a force to be reckoned with. His best year, which bizarrely was his only Pro Bowl season, came in 2014. But beyond that, he was the pinnacle of reliability. The only year during that stretch in which he had less than 1,257 yards came in 2012, when he missed over a quarter of the season due to a lingering hamstring injury, and 2015 when he missed the entire season with an ACL tear. He did, however, bounce back the following season with another year of over 1,200 receiving yards, and he managed to lead the league in touchdowns too. There was no denying that for a stretch, Nelson was one of the most feared and respected wide receivers in the entire league. But after the 2016 season, it all went wrong. Rodgers missed about half the season due to injury, and Nelson's production plummeted. The following offseason, he signed a deal with the then Oakland Raiders, but he was clearly not the same force that he had been all those years with Rodgers. I'd go as far as to say that he was utterly forgettable, and apparently Nelson felt his best days were behind him as well, because at the conclusion of the 2018 season, he retired. Now, interestingly, this is not too dissimilar to what we saw play out with another legendary Packers wide receiver, Donald Driver. For years, Driver was one of the most consistently productive wide receivers in the NFL. For the bulk of his career, he was catching passes from Brett Favre before finishing up the twilight of his career with Rodgers. But nevertheless, he, like Jordy Nelson, earned more than his fair share of Lambeau leaps over the years. Driver also broke out in his 4th year in Green Bay, catching 70 passes for 1,064 yards and 9 touchdowns. A pretty pleasant surprise for the Packers, considering they'd only invested a 7th-round pick for him. While Driver's peak numbers weren't quite as high as Nelson's, his prime lasted a little bit longer. And let's be clear, he was no slouch. From 2002 to 2009, he recorded over 1,000 receiving yards every single year. And that was before passing numbers truly started to become inflated. Now, that being said, for the last couple of years of his career, Driver was little more than a veteran presence among the young receiving corps. His numbers dwindled lower and lower each of the last 3 seasons of his career until he finally called it quits in 2013 after 14 seasons, all in Green Bay. This was a bizarrely similar career trajectory to that of one of his contemporaries, Roddy White, who also played his entire career with one organization, though this time it was the Atlanta Falcons. White found success a little earlier in his career than Driver or Nelson, breaking out in year 3 after a mediocre, bordering on disappointing freshman and sophomore campaign. considering that he was a first-round pick. Nevertheless, though, once his third season rolled around, he became a true star and a walking 1,000-plus yard receiving machine. Between 2007 and 2012, he averaged well above 1,200 yards per season. He even topped 1,300 3 times and 100 receptions twice, not to mention 2 double-digit touchdown seasons. He even led the NFL in receptions once in 2010 during an all-pro season in which he snagged 115 catches. Come 2013, however, that superstar version of Roddy White was nowhere to be found. Roddy lasted 3 more seasons in the NFL before he drifted off into an understated retirement. And that brings us to Julio Jones. The once young buck who picked up the slack for Roddy at the end of his career is now moving towards a similar professional demise. During his prime, Julio was truly one of the top 3 wide receivers in the NFL. And it's largely been that way since the Falcons took him 6th overall in the 2011 NFL Draft at Alabama. Every year that Julio played more than 13 games, he recorded well over 1,000 yards. In 2019, the beast of a wide receiver missed out on his 6th straight 1,400-plus yard season by 6 yards. And that was with him missing a game. By damn near every measurable, Julio is a surefire Hall of Famer. At least, he will be once he retires, which at this point ought to be pretty soon. Because Jones has lost his step, and he can barely stay on the field at this point. Which really is a shame, because during his prime, he was absolutely one of the most exciting wide receivers in the game. And now, he's completely forgettable. I bet half of you don't even remember that he's not even on the Falcons anymore. I don't know whose twilight years are less memorable though, Julio Jones or fellow 2010 superstar receiver AJ Green. Green, who played his college ball at the University of Georgia, was actually taken 2 picks ahead of Jones in that same 2011 NFL Draft by the Cincinnati Bengals. And like Jones, he hit the ground running, recording 1,000-plus yards in 6 of the first 7 years of his career, as well as 3 double-digit touchdown seasons. In 2018, the previously durable Green started to show some wear, playing less than 10 games for the first time in his pro career. And the following year, things only got worse, as during training camp, Green suffered torn ligaments in his ankle that eventually cost him the entirety of the season. In his 2 years since returning from injury, Green just hasn't looked like the same player. Not only is his production and performance rather forgettable, but he's almost unrecognizable on the field these days. It feels like the days of his impossibly regular circus catches are well behind him. And now, he's just gonna be another guy for the remainder of his career. Again, I guess it's because a lot of wide receivers are so reliant on their athleticism that it shouldn't be a surprise that we've seen so many stars at the position fade. A guy like Joey Galloway is a great example. Some of the younger NFL fans out there might not know this, but back in his day, Joey Galloway was actually one of the most explosive wide receivers in the NFL. The former 8th overall pick at Ohio State actually ran an unofficial 4.18-second 40-yard dash, which may not be recognized by the NFL, but hey, it is still wildly impressive. Galloway, who played 16 seasons in the NFL, was also a 1,000-yard receiver as a rookie, and he reached that mark in 3 of his first 4 seasons, narrowly missing out in 96 by just 16 yards. And that was for some rather middling Seattle Seahawks teams. Galloway battled through some injuries over the next couple of years, and battled through some organizational dysfunction in his second career stop in Dallas. But he bounced back well, firmly establishing himself as a star in the league again as a member of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, posting 3 straight 1,000-yard seasons for them from 2005 until 2007. But after that, it was over for Galloway quick. During his last 3 years in the NFL, he faded out of the national consciousness, playing for 3 different teams and not even topping 200 yards a season once. Galloway made the mistake that we've seen a couple of other fading star receivers make. He went to New England, hoping to replicate the resurgence that Randy Moss had with Brady and Belichick, not realizing how intense the Patriot way would be. He didn't even make it through October in Foxborough. Like I said, he is certainly not the only star wideout that we've seen meet this fate. Chad Ochocinco and Reggie Wayne both know that feeling. Ocho Cinco, formerly known as Chad Johnson, was a 6-time Pro Bowler and 2-time All-Pro selection as a Bengal, recording over 1,000 yards in all but one season between 2002 and 2009. But in 2010, his performance in Cincy started to dwindle. And then the following year at the Patriots, his last in the NFL, he was a downright non-factor. He was only able to earn 3 starts, and he caught just 15 passes during the regular season. That is a far cry from the star we saw torturing defensive backs across the NFL during the early to mid-2000s. There is speculation that Chad's decline stemmed from a lack of focus, and just couldn't create separation from opposing cornerbacks the way he used to. Interestingly, Reggie Wayne's prime was more impressive, and his fall was even greater. After Wayne's breakout season in 2003, the only year that he recorded less than 1,000 yards came in 2011, which was his first year without Peyton Manning, during which he was subjected to a pitiful play of Curtis Painter, Dan Orlovsky, and Kerry Collins. Talk about a shock to the system after playing in a Peyton Manning-led offense for all those years. Now, Wayne, to his credit, did bounce back during Andrew Luck's rookie season the following year, notching 1,355 yards and 5 touchdowns. But ultimately, this proved to be his star burning out. His production dipped over the next couple of years before he tried his luck in New England during 2015, only to get cut in early September. And unfortunately for Wayne, the other NFL teams seemed to forget that he existed as well. No one had any real interest in bringing him on board, and he announced his retirement the following offseason. A rather anticlimactic ending to an otherwise amazing, likely Hall of Fame career. Now, it isn't just the speedy wide receivers who have made a habit of going from superstar status to downright forgettable either. Both Brandon Marshall and Dez Bryant, who made their living overpowering and outreaching opposing defensive backs, met similar fates at the end of their careers. Starting with Brandon Marshall, whose decline came as a shock to fans because he was one of the most physically imposing wide receivers that the NFL had ever seen. So much so that former NFL cornerback Brandon Flowers once described him as a defensive lineman playing wide receiver who simply wanted to inflict punishment. The 6-time Pro Bowler, however, completely vanished just 1 year removed from putting up monster numbers during his first year as a New York Jet in 2015. He went from 1,502 yards and 14 touchdowns to 788 and 3 before totaling a measly 290 yards and 1 touchdown over his last 2 NFL seasons with the crosstown rival Giants and the Seattle Seahawks. Marshall was serviceable, but expendable. Gone was a superstar who had defensive backs reserving the cold tub for after their matchups with him. Now, during his prime years, Dez Bryant, who possessed a muscular 6'2" frame to go along with a 38-inch vertical jump, also inflicted plenty of punishment in his own right. He led the NFL in touchdowns in 2014, made 3 Pro Bowls, 1 first-team All-Pro, and was one of the most feared red zone targets year in and year out. But after his All-Pro season in 2014, Dez completely fell off a cliff and became a borderline afterthought in the Cowboys' offense. He went from 3 straight seasons of 12-plus touchdowns, including that league-leading total of 16 in 2014, to averaging less than 5 per season towards the end of his career. It wasn't that he was unplayable or anything like that, but it was clear that his best days were well behind him. And he was just yet another star wide receiver who ungracefully drifted out of his prime and into insignificance. But which NFL wide receiver do you think had the most dramatic fall from grace? Did we miss anyone? Join us in the comment section below. If you like this video and learned a thing or two, clicking the like button helps out a ton. And hey, we appreciate it. If this is your first time coming around to TPS though, subscribing is a great idea because we put out videos like this every single day. But as always, thanks for watching and we'll see you guys next time.